Aloha, everybody, and welcome to this episode of the Triple F Podcast, Faith and Family First. And today we're going to be looking at women of childbearing age, which is the ages of 15 to 44, and how they feel about abortion, how they feel about adoption, and it's not what you think. So let's chat about that. Hello, Jim.
Hi.
You know one thing I know for sure?
Jesus is Lord.
Well, that's a given. I know you are not a woman of childbearing age.
You don't know that.
That's true. I don't know how you identify now.
That's right.
Okay.
I want to participate in this as a woman of childbearing age.
Okay. Then
I came in equipped. You've bigoted me right out of it.
I have to give a shout out to our Washington counterpart, FPC. They did a video that has been viewed over 1 million times on going around on a college campus asking if a male could identify as a 6'2" or 6'3" Chinese woman and if that would be okay. It's a really good video. Look it up. So, Jim, I shared with you what we're going to talk about today, which is another one of our studies that we like to do. Dr. George Barna, and he did this with the Cultural Research Center, which is the Arizona Christian University. Yes.
It's really small, but it's right on the printout.
Right there. And this is something they did back in 2022. They did a survey of women of childbearing age, which, as I identified in the opening, are women between the ages of 15 and 44. And they were really trying to drill down. The real issue was adoption. They wanted to see how these women viewed adoption. And I think that they probably weren't surprised on the results. I know you weren't surprised on the results because of...
It's very troubling in our country that so many people are not in charge of their worldview. They have a worldview that is a mishmash of all kinds of inconsistent ideas, and they, vote for people with those dumb understandings, but they claim to be church-going Christians. That is very, very troubling.
I when I was reading the report, I was picturing in my mind, because the majority of women in this age group are the millennials. Okay. So these are the ones that were born between 1984 and 2002. So this is the predominant motherhood is in that age group now. And so when Barna was kind of drilling down what the worldview is of these women at that age group, it kind of went back to that show we did before where we actually talked about the worldview.
Yeah.
And I think it blew me out of the water. But so I think let's talk about this report, because I think that in this month, as we're celebrating Respect Life Month, I want to continue the discussion on what's the alternative to abortion. The alternative to abortion is adoption, right? That's one of the alternatives. And you would think that this is something that people widely accept, that people go, yeah, that's a great answer. But after drilling down at this number, that is not quite what we saw in these numbers. So,
well, I just, my brain does like really odd things to me when I'm listening. So if this month is Respect Life Month.
Yes.
And and the next statement actually is going to turn out to be pretty true. The other 11 months of the year must be Respect Death months. And we actually do have a tremendous amount of respect for death. We go to funerals, we mourn, we miss people,
I think that because, again, we talk about this ad nauseum, that we're subject to social media now. And I mean that loosely for people like us that aren't. But the majority of people are led by social media. That's how they get their
really
politics.
Dangerous because people can
really
make statements of fact that have no evidence, that are actually untrue, but if you agree with the message, you'll assume it's a fact.
Exactly.
It's bizarre.
I'm going to make the link to this full study available, and this is one that's free.
And people should.
And they should actually go look at it.
To the web page, because these guys do this like this is their job. Day in and day out, they're doing studies, they're writing the reports about them, and then they publish them.
And what's good about that is people who are involved in ministry are going to be able to see this and understand maybe why there's a disconnect.
Right.
Because you do have to learn how to talk to different age groups differently. And I think that sometimes we think, especially us older people, I'm cusp between Generation Z and baby boomers. So I have a little bit of both on that. But I know with the boomer generation, they have a whole idea of this is the way it should be. And then as you get down to each of these different generations, it's a mishmash now of what people believe. And I think that that's why we're seeing less and less people that are attending church, because people that are going into a church building, they're going in there with a preconceived idea of what they want to hear from the pulpit. And if they don't hear from it, they go. There used to be a day where you would go to the church and you'd know that what was being preached from the pulpit was the truth.
That's right.
And that's why you went, right? Now it's like, I need to find a pastor that does rock and roll music. And I am shocked at how many churches now are moving towards entertainment more so than just preaching the gospel, because they want to bring people into the church.
So I go to 2 churches every week. Neither of them are into the entertainment thing. I'm missing somewhere.
I was going to say there are people on the other end of the spectrum that are like, look, I'm not going to go in there and listen to a boring,
I didn't say they were boring, but I'm saying it's not jugglers and clowns.
But what's the opposite of entertainment, right? They're opposite. Well,
sleep.
Okay. So they have a portion of this where they're saying before we start. So they wanted to give a picture of these people, right? So
you know what Waxer always says?
What?
Content by itself doesn't give meaning. You need content plus context for meaning, which is true. Anyway, go ahead.
Thank you, Pastor Wesker. I love that. Okay, so we're going to talk first of all about the group of people that they talked about and how they fall. And here's what was really interesting. So in this overall amount of women in this age group, 1 out of 20 possess a biblical worldview.
And does the article define what they require for a biblical worldview? They actually do, because why don't you share that? Because people will think they have one themselves, and when you share the context,
that kind of gets into the point of why it isn't bigger. Because, like you mentioned, some of them view themselves as being a Christian, but then when you break it down to having a biblical worldview, these are people that they're known as being born again, that they attend church once a week or more, that they're involved in church ministries, that they have a bigger community. So, I mean, there's a lot of things. And that's why after a while, you have to start saying, okay, I'm not part of that, because this particular generation is more spiritual than religious.
But I would also say, and we know from biblical history, somebody can consider themselves to be a follower of Christ and in a certain situation make a personal selected choice not thinking it that way, but that's the result. So personal worldview is a big concept, but it gets acted upon moment by moment by moment, which is why at the beginning I said it's very troubling the number of people who claim to be church-going Christians that on those moment-to-moment decision-making opportunities don't make the selection that's congruent with having a Christian worldview.
That's right. And that's why relationship building is so important. So when somebody's going to church and you're seeing them in the church building every week, that's great. I mean, at least they're in the church building, but you have to get to know them and understand what makes them tick. How do they come to their decisions on a daily basis? Mm-hmm. That's how you know if someone's truly living a Christ-like life, or if they're just showing up on Sundays or Saturdays because there's nothing better to do. And there are some people that kind of, well, the church is right down the road, and I get free coffee or whatever it is. So, hey, I'm not saying that that's everybody. I'm just saying that we all understand, no matter what church you go to, you cannot assume that everybody in your church is saved.
Well, you can assume that everybody's on a journey.
Right. Right. The pastor's job is to preach the truth.
No, the pastor's job is to take off Monday because Sunday was so hard.
Okay, people are listening right now, and if you want to send any hate email, send it to Jim at jameshochberglaw.com. So Anyway, so this is the group of people we're talking about, right? So their biblical worldview, 1 out of 20, okay, fit into that category. 54% of those polled consider themselves Christian. And that goes back to what you said.
And that's
right?
self-proclaimed. So what does it mean?
So that's why 1 in 20 is a lot different than 54%. That's why there's a disconnect. And of these people, this is what you can start understand why their view of adoption and abortion and all that is so skewed. So
but what it also tells you is 46% didn't consider themselves Christians.
Right.
So that means they're not polling in a church. They're polling the population.
And actually, that's even better. Now, I would like to see if you go into a particular church, if you were to do this kind of polling.
I think pastors should look at these and do them within their own bodies so they know what's going on.
That's really important. And youth ministry, the youth ministers really need to find out what their people are thinking, because these are our future leaders. And if they're confused, they're not going to get the truth anywhere else. The church is the only place that they're going to be preached
Which we talked about in an earlier show.
Yep. And so, number one, people need to reach out to their pastors, and they need to thank their pastor when their pastor is preaching unapologetically the gospel of Jesus Christ. You got to be thankful, because I'm sure the pastor hears the negative stuff all the time. I'm sure they do.
I got a question for you.
Yes.
Can a pastor preach unapologetically on apologetics?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
I think so. Pastor Waxer, I think, is a really good example of that.
I just wondered.
And there's probably others. I fellowship with a lot of different Christian pastors, and I'm proud of a lot of them. A lot of them do what they got to do because they know that Jesus says, "Woe be unto them that lead my little children astray."
That's true. You familiar with Father EJ?
Yes.
He's great.
No, that's what I'm saying. I rub shoulders with a lot of great pastors. And so I just want them to know that I just love all of them. So, okay. Now, again, talking about this group of women, out of all of these women that were polled, 45%, Jim, have noted that they've suffered some kind of abuse.
How is that defined these days?
It could be anything from domestic violence to there's quite a bit on there. So I think that tells you a lot you need to know as well, because if these women are coming from a place of being abused, then obviously they're going to have certain feelings.
But I'm thinking about it in terms of the hurt feeling victimization of life today. And these are people in their 30s, but does abuse mean somebody wouldn't say my pronoun? That's what I'm asking.
Well, the most common experiences was undergoing physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. That's how they
But the pronoun could be emotional abuse.
It could be.
I just wondered.
Okay. Well, okay. And then 36% of these women came from a single parent home.
Wow.
29% received some form of government aid or welfare. And 1 out of 10 were in foster care. 62% of all these women said abortion should be legal under all circumstances.
62%.
62%.
Wow. How many of them have had children? Did it say?
Most of them.
Wow.
Yes. Or they're planning to have children very soon. 18%. Only 18% thought that abortion should be illegal in all circumstances.
Wow.
So this is where they're coming from. So that's what we want to look at. So the question is, okay, so if they're all feeling this way about abortion, how do they feel about adoption? Because obviously that's just another choice, right? You would think if you're going to argue choice, then how about arguing choice and saying, okay, so some women are going to choose abortion, but some women want to choose adoption. Right? Interesting. That's not how this turned out. And I think that for those of our brothers and sisters who are involved in the pro-life movement, they need to understand this, because that's the easy talking point, right? No, we don't want you to have an abortion. We want you to have, we want you to participate in it. First of all, I want to give a shout out to Brad and Esther McDaniel. They are a pastor and his wife that actually help people with adoption here. Harvest Family Ministries. There is not a lot of Christian ministries right here in the state that can help with adoption. So it's not easy. In fact, if you go online, I just did this. If you go online and you look for Adoption Hawaii, you're going to come to these mainland organizations.
Oh, really?
That are going to give you information.
Well, they also do foster care.
They also
ministry.
do foster care ministry. But that's what I'm saying, that there's a disconnect. And we're going to look at some statistics.
Didn't we have them on a show
We
once,
did have them on a show
2 years ago
and
or
we
something?
are going to have them back
Okay.
because, again, we want to continue the discussion of we can say no to all these things until the cows come home. But we want to talk about what are the answers. What do you do instead of just saying no? So we're going to talk about that. So what they found in this study is that a majority of them did understand what adoption was. So when they asked them, okay, so what are your rights in adoption? They understand you can have an open adoption, you can have a closed adoption, right? So they understood, and that was good news, right? That a majority of them understood what adoption was. But when you started drilling down into who would actually choose adoption, I started to get concerned. And I think that our viewers and listeners should be too. So
are they being asked to adopt their own pregnancy out
Yes.
or to adopt somebody
Yes.
else's kid in?
Yes, because they were very clear in this study on whether it was an intended pregnancy or an unintended pregnancy. And there was a little bit of a difference when they asked them, okay, if you had an intended pregnancy, what would your choices be? And of course, overwhelmingly said if they had an intended pregnancy, they would keep the child. The other choices was abortion and adoption. And I thought it was very interesting that they had an intended pregnancy and there's still those that choose abortion. And I was like, wait, what? If you're intending to get pregnant, are you? And then it boils down to, according to them, it boils down to a lot of things. So this is what the report says, right? It may seem unusual for a woman to become intentionally pregnant and yet consider abortion or adoption for the conceived child. There are various explanations for this thinking. One has to do with the younger women interpreting intentionally pregnant as meaning the child is not the result of rape. Another is that most of the women who said they would consider adoption and or abortion were within the younger portion of childbearing age women and represent a segment for whom having options is important, even if they don't use them.
Okay, well, they're supporting it for other people. But let me ask you this. So 54 or 56% of the women in this study identified as believing Christians, born-again, church-going believing Christians. When they're moving into the answers to the questions on abortion and adoption, are the percentages of the ones that are Christians or the percentage, the answers of the entire group?
Group.
So that's a little bit unhelpful to me because I would like to, for purposes of ministry work, I would like to know of the 54, 56% that identified as Christians, what are they thinking?
Yeah, and I think that there might be a portion of the report that breaks that down. I didn't see it. It didn't jump out at me. But we are going to look at the statistics on when somebody's facing an unintended pregnancy, where do they get their advice from and what makes a difference to them? Because again, I think that that's a major shocker. What came out of the report as well is very interesting. And this, again, is directly from the report. The biggest correlation regarding the value of life, so again, we're talking overall, all of these women, had to do with faith. Specifically, the more committed to Christianity women were, the more likely they were to value life. Makes perfect sense.
Makes sense to me.
If you're going to church and you're getting a biblical worldview teaching, then you're going to walk out of church, hopefully with a biblical worldview, you would think, right?
Yeah.
You would hope, right? And it says a surprisingly small majority of women interviewed, and that was about 57%, believe that having children is a special God-given privilege. A little more than half, which is 31%, disagreed with that idea. So again, what you're throwing it out there, right? That there's this pro-life mentality among the youth. And generally, that's not what's happening. You might have someone that's choosing life, but they're not seeing this because it's a gift of God. It's just a choice thing. I'd rather have the child, right? So I think it's something to consider if you're working with youth, right? Again, I want to be clear that they did break down the difference between intentional and unintentional pregnancy. But let's look at a couple of the statistics. I think that would be really important. So when asking if you're going to abort or you're going to adopt, so out of all these children, all these women, 14% would choose abortion and 15% would choose adoption. And so let's look at that first slide, which is reasons given for openness to placing their child for adoption. And look at that. Personal financial limitations were their top reason for choosing to place. So it wasn't even like what's best for the child.
No.
It's what's best for me,
of course,
which is amazing. A desire to serve the child's best interests, 32%. Seeking to benefit others, 20%. Now, remember, this is of 100%. I think that that's pretty telling that less than half.
That's way more than 100%.
Well, and that's because there are different...
the same people answer different questions differently.
But again, to think, that if you're talking about these are people that are choosing adoption, here's what their reason. I was shocked that the number one reason was finances. Somebody thinks... Well,
but I'm not shocked, because if you're going to choose adoption because of something that requires information outside of whatever you have, the information that you have is your financial limitations. You're living it day by day. Like when gasoline is $4.50 and milk is $7 and eggs are $12.
Well, it's true. I was a single mom, and I'm telling you that finances...
I was a single mom. Oh, no, I wasn't.
I remember when I was pregnant with my second child, I was not married, and I admit that. Yes, people, I know. I'm a normal person. But when I was pregnant with my second child, I had friends telling me, you need to abort, Eva. There's no way you can be a single mom with two kids. Like, I was already a single mom with one, and they're like, you're crazy. What are you doing? And these were friends, some of them attending church. So I can see where the financial thing becomes a big thing. Well, let's look now at the reasons that they don't choose adoption. So let's look at that slide. So this is the reasons given for not being open to place their child for adoption. The number one, 56%, they just don't want to give up a child that you gave birth to.
That's very close to the same number, percentage-wise, that self-proclaimed to be believing Christians.
Yep.
That's interesting.
It is very...
It may not be the same people, but it could be.
Yep. And then 39% said it's emotionally too hard to give up the child.
It could be. Depends on if you like it or not.
27%, the desire to protect the child from potential harm and neglect. And
now that's interesting, because if the mother was the drug addict, the mother probably wouldn't think about protecting the child from harm or neglect. So I'm guessing it's the guy that got her pregnant.
That's interesting. And the number 4 reason, there's many reasons, we're not going to go into all of them, but the number 4 reason was they don't believe in adoption for religious or moral reasons. I want to meet any pastor that says, do not put your child up for
I never heard that one.
Yeah, neither.
Well, we got about 5 minutes left, and I do want to get to the next slide, and then I want to share some stuff about
this is good,
worldview, because this is serious business.
It is. Yeah. So let's go to the last slide, because this last slide is the sources of guidance, right? So now this is where women that are facing so this is an unintentionally pregnant woman, okay? Where do they go to get their guidance? And look at this. So,
so if they chose adoption, abortion, raised their child, or don't know,
this is where they got
him.
Yes.
Okay.
So the number one reason that
Planned Parenthood, yikes. Sorry.
You know what? Almost all, and that was asked in here. Mostly all of them had a favorable impression of Planned Parenthood.
That's where I get my mammograms.
So I did have a friend that, correct me, she is a Christian, and she doesn't promote Planned Parenthood, but she said, Eva, when you're doing what you're doing, please remember that there are some women that utilize Planned Parenthood for women's services that are not abortion, that don't have money to get it anywhere else. So just keep that in mind when you're attacking them. And I'm like, okay, for the 3% that they do, right? Okay, so let's see, abortion, 24. So again, this is from family. So family is the number one source where women are going to get their adoption, abortion, raised child, and don't know. And 46%, because of their family, choose to raise their child. Mm-hmm. I thought that was very important. Doctor, medical professional was next. 34% helped with adoption. 43% of medical profession steered them to abortion. Now, who do young girls trust?
I wonder if Planned Parenthood is considered a medical professional to the questioners.
Yep. Now, because we only have a couple of minutes left, I want you to point out what it says about church and religious leaders, Jim.
Well, abortion is by 1%. Adoption 15%. It's pretty low, actually.
Yes. So what would your call to action by just looking at this? What would your call to action be?
If you want to be what I want to be and what I think you want to be, if our viewers want to be people who strive moment by moment, day by day to live a Christian worldview life, you have to read the first 6 chapters of the book of Daniel. Daniel is Daniel in the lion's den and the fiery furnace with Meshach and all those guys. But that's not the point. You know what the point was? They went through those things because first they had purposed in their heart to honor God. Seriously. If that's not the first purpose in your heart, you're not going to have a Christian worldview.
And you could tell that every single morning when you wake up. What is the very first thing you do? I saw, I like to watch How to Simplify Your Life kind of YouTube videos and Christian ones. And I thought it was really cool that I saw this lady saying that the minute her feet touch the floor, as soon as her feet touch the floor, the first thing she does is honor God for giving her another day to do ministry.
Yeah.
And your feet have to touch the floor every day, because if they don't touch the floor, you're not getting out of bed, right? So I kind of like that. You're purposing in your heart that everything you do for that day is going to be to honor the Lord that you claim to serve. And you know how people know who you serve? By how you serve.
Okay.
So anyway, continue your thing.
Well, I think we're out of time, and you might want to close us up.
Okay, so let's do this then. Because this is Respect Life Month, we're going to try to do one more show where we talk about the importance of motherhood and family. So stay tuned, because who knows what Jim and I are going to do, because we change our mind daily. We want to hear from you on what you think we should talk about as well. So comment. Like this video, subscribe, share, and hit that notification button so you know every time we upload a new video. And stay tuned for our upcoming show. We're going to do our birthday show, so we want to hear from you, questions that you guys might want to know about us. We'll see you all next week. Mahalo, everybody.
Become a sponsor of the show. Contact Eva, find out how. Aloha.